My name's Davida Shinsky, and the title of this presentation, it's the show is Live Without Limits. The title is Credo of Support. And what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about my disability, only in the fact that when you think of toxic relationships and communication and how people tend to communicate with someone with a disability. Now, as you can notice, right now I seem to be kind of leaning over to one side, and that's simply because I'm dead weight on one side, and because of that, I have no control, and so I don't ordinarily, I have to make an effort to tend to move and sit correctly. Now, when I was 14, I went through some major surgery because my hand was very drawn up and the fingers were very curled. And as you will notice now, the fingers are double jointed and they tend to curl up a little bit. And I have very little movement in it. And this is to support the wrist and hold the wrist up. Now, what I also do is I have the walk-on brace for my right foot because it helps me go heel-toe because I do not do that normally. And then recently, because as my orthopedic surgeon said many years ago, the fact that I've fallen so many times and there's no fluid around my knee, that it's like I have football knees. And every so often, my knee would go out because the bone was rubbing against each other and it just needed to be pulled over. And recently, I was given this brace that fits on my right foot and sits around the knee to give it support and pull it straighter. And for 50 years, I didn't wear the walk on because I had the old time brace that had to be basically put into the shoe and couldn't be removed. If you remember the old saddle Oxford shoes, that's the only thing I could wear. And now with the walk on, it slips in and out of the shoe and it gives me support and it helps me walk better. But one thing I was doing during the years that I didn't wear the brace was I was making sure that I was going to the gym and working out at least 3 times a week because it helped with balance. It helped with a few other things that helped me control how I walked, and so I didn't fall as much. And what I'm going to do is read from something that I came across 30 years ago that's called the Credo of Support, and you can understand just what I mean by communication when you hear this. Throughout history, people with physical and mental disabilities have been abandoned at birth, banished from society, used as jesters, drowned and burned during the Inquisition, gassed in Nazi Germany, and still continue to be segregated, institutionalized, tortured in the name of behavior management, ahead abused, raped, euthanized, and murdered. Now, for the first time, people with disabilities are taking their rightful place as fully contributing citizens. The danger is that we will respond with remediation and benevolence rather than equality and respect. And so we offer you the Credo of Support. Now, if you look at the Americans with Disabilities Act, these are some of the issues that are covered to help make people with disabilities have more of an equal opportunity. And access to the internet has also created more equality when it comes to employment. Do not see my disability as a problem. Recognize that my disability is an attribute. Do not see my disability as a deficit. It is you who see me as a deviant and helpless. Do not try to fix me because I am not broken. Support me. I can make my own contribution to the community in my way. Do not see me as your client. I am a fellow citizen. See me as your neighbor. Remember, none of us is self sufficient. Do not try to modify my behavior. Be still and listen. What you define as inappropriate may be my attempt to communicate with you in the only way I can. Do not try to change me. You have no right. Help me learn what I want to know. Do not hide your uncertainty behind professional distance. Be a person who listens and does not take my struggle away from me while trying to make it all better. Do not use theories and strategies on me. Be with me. And when we struggle with each other, let that give rise to self reflection. Do not try to control me. I have a right to my power as a person. When you call noncompliance or manipulation may actually be the only way I can exert some control over my life. Do not teach me to be obedient, submissive, and polite. I need to feel entitled to say no if I'm to protect myself. Do not be charitable towards me. The last thing the world needs is another Jerry Lewis. Be my ally against those who exploit me for their own gratification. Do not try to be my friend. I deserve more than that. Get to know me. We may become friends. Do not help me, even if it does make you feel good. Ask me if I need your help. Let me show you how you can best assist me. Do not admire me. A desire to live a full life does not warrant adoration. Respect me, for respect presumes equality. Do not tell, correct, and lead. Listen, support, and follow. Do not work on me, work with me. As you can see, when you hear that, what they're talking about is the fact that how people treated with disabilities, that until the 1960s, many people with disabilities were basically warehoused in institutions and not given the ability to live a full life. When you're institutionalized, you basically live in the room that you are given. You don't have the ability to get around, to do things. And it was not really until the late 60s and the 70s that laws began to come up and guarantee people with disabilities equality. In fact, when I was educated, there were no laws that guarantee people with disabilities the right to an education. So the fact that I did get educated was an asset, but at the same time, teachers just didn't understand that I learned differently because reading it and hearing it isn't enough. Until I actually apply something and use it, it's hard for me to actually learn it simply because cerebral palsy affects how you learn. That it gets in short-term memory, but it doesn't always get into the long-term memory. And when it doesn't always get into long-term memory, what happened was my grades in school never showed what my true capabilities are. And yet, once I basically went on my own and I grew up in an environment where I had a father that because I wore the brace, it was any arguments that happened, it had to be my fault. So he was an abuser and he physically abused. I got the brunt of it. My mother grew up in a negative environment. So what did she do? She was just repeating the same behaviors. So that what happened? She was always telling me, you can't live on your own. You can't think for yourself. You can't hold a job. You can't. Because, and in a way, maybe that was her way of feeling that she was doing right by me. But also, it was a situation where she wanted to hold her children close to her so that as she got older, she would not be alone, and basically used their disabilities as a way to hold them back. That's why she and I clashed for so many years until she passed away. And there were many a times that I used to say to her, just remember what you give because that's what you're getting back. And she didn't always, or she heard what she wanted to hear. And when I tried to talk to her about what I wanted to do with my business, all she heard was I wanted her money, even though I never asked her for a dime. And therefore, when there were several times that as I worked in my business, I basically became homeless because I struggled. I didn't have the mobility to get out there and travel and do the things to really establish myself in my industry. So that when technology came about, it made it easier for me to compete. And it's taken a couple of years, but now I'm starting to see an income come in. Now, as you can see also, I don't always focus when I'm looking at something with my eyes, and that's simply because it's that I have no depth perception of peripheral vision in this eye, and so going up and down steps becomes very difficult. So I often will use the paratransit system. And now the IDEA, or Individual Disability Education Act, came about in the late 70s and took effect in 1980. And then in 1992, they passed the Americans with Disabilities Act because so many people with disabilities were getting out of school and were not able to find employment. And ADA basically, what made that different was, okay, you had the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which addressed the same issues. But when ADA became law, they put a clause in there that anyone who felt they were being discriminated against when it came to having opportunities for employment, then they had a right to go to the EEOC or the Department of Justice and file a lawsuit. And prior to that, companies would basically say things publicly, but then behind closed doors, they would do something totally different. Now, what I'm going to do is finish out by telling you a little story that in 1996, the Olympics was in Atlanta, and in the early 90s, when they were bidding for the Olympics, they refused to bid for the Paralympics. So the disability community got together and bid for it. And the head of the IOC at the time believed in the Paralympics. So what he did was he went in and changed the bylaws so that now any host country who bids for one is automatically bidding for both. And the Paralympics always follows the Olympics by 2 weeks. Now, I'm going to also tell you the difference between the Paralympics and Special Olympics because there's always a confusion about that. The Paralympics is run like the Olympics. You have to compete. One person wins gold, one person wins silver, and one person wins the bronze. Now, in Special Olympics, because it's geared towards people with developmental disabilities, and because it was founded by the Kennedys, that everyone wins an award. Everyone gets a ribbon because just the fact that they compete is a win-win for them. Now, how this all relates to my 5-day challenge is that the the challenge is called Change Your Thoughts, Transform Your Life. And when you have low self-esteem and you're constantly being bombarded about how you're less than perfect, well, then you believe in that. So how do you overcome that? How do you turn that around to believe in yourself? Now, if you want to participate in my 5-day challenge, you can go to changeyourthoughtschallenge.com/join the challenge. And currently, my next challenge is going to be from February 7th through the 11th. And then after that, I'll be doing it every month. And it's going to be held at 8 o'clock in the evening Eastern Standard Time and 5 o'clock in the evening Pacific Standard Time.